We all remember that charming CGI movie from the mid-2000s. You know the one with the zoo animals in New York, whose number included a lion and a giraffe, who then escape and go on adventures to Africa. You know, Madagascar. Wait a minute. The wild? The what now? The wild? It's a Disney release that came out less than 12 months after the more illustrious first Madagascar movie. Did it? What? A Disney movie? Really? Yes, I tell you no lies. And this here is its video game adaptation released exclusively on the Game Boy Advance in 2006. As intrigued as I am by the game first, I'm even more intrigued by this movie that so unsuccessfully aped, pun intended, the DreamWorks Animal Escapade. The Wild tells the story of a Central Park Zoo internee called Samson the Lion. And well, he's got his friends with him. Benny the Squirrel, Bridget the Giraffe, Larry the Anaconda, and Nigel the Koala, along with Samson's son Ryan. Ryan, the lion, wants to go back to the wild so he can practice his roar, and he stumbles himself into a container that is rumoured to be heading back to Africa and leaves on that there truck. The friends witness the truck leaving and get all fretful about Ryan's safety, and so they follow him in an attempt to get the juvenile big cat back to the zoo. They initially do this by tearing up the Big Apple, encountering ferocious stray dogs and alligators before boarding the ship to the African subcontinent. Samson the lion isn't very attuned to the wild, as he might have led his boy to believe, and he soon discovers that being a former circus lion in the wilds of Africa, well, it's no cakewalk, let me tell you that. Boy oh boy, if you've seen Madagascar, then you're currently wondering in which Disney office they did the photocopying of that script in. Of course, these cinematic quirky coinkydinks occasionally happen. I'll give you K9 and Turner and Hooch, Deep Impact and Armageddon, Dante's Peak and Volcano, Bug's Life and Ants, Existence and Matrix. Sometimes similar films just happen to come out at the same time. Directed by Steve Williams and featuring the vocal talents of Kiefer Sutherland, Jim Belushi, Eddie Izzard, William Shatner and Gian Garofalo, The Wild was released in 2006 to middling to poor reviews. A lot of the critique was levelled at the uncanny valley nature of the finely detailed yet slightly creepy looking animation of its furry cast, along with what was described as a dull and derivative script. Obviously, the comparisons to the highly thought of Madagascar didn't help, given that film's commercial success. The Wild was a critical failure. It currently sports a 19% aggregate score on Rotten Tomatoes. In the eye of the audience, well, there just wasn't a taste for yet more zoo animals out of their depth in their native lands. It debuted at 4th in the US box office behind Scary Movie 4, Ice Age 2 and The Bench Warmers. It took back $102 million from an $80 million investment worldwide, which sounds alright, but when you factor in advertising and marketing, then The Wild probably ended up in the red. Not that I actually saw any advertising, so that would have been money poorly spent as well. I definitely saw the DVD when I was working at HMV, but I always thought it was like another company like Sony Imageworks or someone like that. I didn't realise it was an actual Disney release. Anyway, The Wild, the game. It was released by Buena Vista Games, which, as a Disney subsidiary, was an obvious publishing company for it to be distributed by. Right? It was developed by the Climax Group, who had previously developed several SpongeBob games, along with a host of other licenses, including one based on the previous year's Disney movie, Herbie Fully Loaded. In the game, you're placed in the furry feet of two of the movie's bestiary, those being Benny the Squirrel and the cat, Samson, as they journey across the world, trying to liberate the prodigal son. Or anti-liberate him, I guess, seeing as you're trying to put him back in a zoo. That's like Mammalian Jail. You swap between the pair of these beasts during the adventure, who each have distinct stages across 19 levels of 2D side-scrolling platformery. Each has their own abilities, with Benny utilising the high-flying agility of your average squirrel. We've all seen them do amazing feats, I'm sure. He can hurl acorns willy-nilly at his adversaries, he can scamper up trees, and he can perform trapeze acts to somersault and vault all over the shop. He's a nimble beggar, all right. The lion's share of levels, unquestionably pun intended there, fall to old Samson, who is a lot more grounded than his nut-grasping counterpart. He can still leap about up and down the branches of trees and buildings, but Benny definitely has the edge over the lion in the sprightly fleet of footness department. Where Samson shines is with his close-quarter swipes and his blood-curdling roar, which freezes the menagerie of evil enemy beasts in their tracks. The other characters from the movie make appearances throughout the game, and they will lend you their assistance in various ways. Nigel the koala will point the way, and Dopey Larry the anaconda will act as some sort of spring to vault you higher up in the level. In addition to the platform stages, Samson has other duties in the game, which are usually boss encounters. The action zooms in on the King of Beasts, and he gets all kung fu bipedal in what amounts to a variant of the IK Plus bonus stages. You anticipate the time and the corner of the screen where one of Kazar, the main villain of the story, or one of his cronies will appear from, and you can then wave a corresponding claw in the direction of said creature and dispatch it accordingly. Take that, you blighter! As you can probably see from this footage, we are firmly in generic platformer territory here. For all the Game Boy Advance's many positive aspects and its huge and varied back catalogue of excellent games, there sure were a lot of very generic licensed platformers on the system, as evidenced by some of the games I've covered on the channel, like the Santa Claus 3 and 80 Days Around the World. I suppose, what with it being a Super NES in your pocket, you're also going to get a lot of similar games to what that format had, those being licensed 2D platformer games of an average nature. But even in the world of average platformers based on properties, there are degrees of quality. Think of your average 2D platformer as a dull suburban town, with slightly affluent areas, those being games like the recently covered A Nightmare Before Christmas, and those areas that are a bit down market. Well, The Wild definitely has the quality of a man in a vest sitting on a broken fridge in the front lawn quality to it. It's a bit run down. Christ, that was a torture metaphor. The issues for a seemingly innocuous platformer soon mount up. The Wild has a fair bit of padding. 19 stages sounds like a lot, but they're all relatively short. The Wild solves this issue in the most inelegant of ways. You'll go through the tutorial, play through the first few levels, and then the game will prevent you from going any further. The game wants you, you see, to come completely out of story mode and replay the already played tutorial and early levels and complete numerous challenges in those levels based on things like completion time and enemies dispatched. Once you've ticked off enough of these tasks, the game allows you to continue the storyline. This seems a little bit backward to me. Surely you'd have these challenges as a bonus for people who want to replay the game after the storyline is completed. That surely makes sense. Going back to play these levels so soon and being forced to play them 3 or 4 more times before you're allowed to continue with the storyline just exposes the huge issues with the game's levels themselves. You'll be charged with finishing most levels in less than a minute, and you'll do it fairly handily. They are that short. Also, you'll be remiss to want to play these levels again. The first level itself is an exercise in frustration when you first play it, due to the janky floppy nature of the squirrel's trapezium flipping controls. Sometimes it'll work too well and you'll spin off over a great chunk of a level, and the other times you'll just sort of limply fart off the side of one of these trapezes and fall limply into the water below and drown, potentially mentally scarring a child who's just about to give you an almond or something. No, that isn't part of the game. It's just my mind conjuring an image of a squirrel drowning and it mentally scarring a child. This is how my brain works. It's enough to turn at least 13 hairs on your head grey per flopping failure. This first level, but not the challenge mode, has its own elaborate padding as well, as you try to deal with a pigeon who flies up and down and left and right, and you have to engage them with that god-awful flipping mechanic a whole lot. The second level is an ice level. Yes, an ice level already, as Samson the lion is set upon by penguins, having ice levels this early on with an already inertia-afflicted lumbering lion like Samson, well, it's not a lot of fun. Later levels in the city, the sewers and Africa itself have their frustrating moments too, but the first two levels may see you put down your Game Boy and walk away saying cuss words that would make little baby Jesus cry eternally about. So can I recommend The Wild? Not really, no. Despite its okay graphics, it is a decidedly phoned-in affair. In a way, it's sort of in keeping with the movie it's based on. You see, that was an inferior clone of something not particularly amazing to start off with. And yeah, I said it, Madagascar is annoying too. I'd like to move it out of sight, along with The Wild on the Game Boy Advance. It's beastly. Anyway, Wild fans, I hope you enjoyed this animalistic adventure, and hopefully you'll come back. So anyway, like, subscribe, and Kay, thanks, bye.